2026 elections right around the corner. What is the American appetite, political appetite from the populace for an actual war right before the election? Oof, that is a serious gamble. Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and in classic American fashion, we are staring down the barrel of the next major war and conflict, this one with Venezuela, it looks like. And, you know, I think it's been, what, total of, I got it written down here, 76 days since the end of the 12-day war with Iran. We haven't even made it 3 months. Interesting how this works out. Looks like war is back on the menu, boys.
Looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
Now, like always with these things, we're not really getting the full story from the administration or the media, the real strategic intent behind this whole thing. So that's what we're going to go over today, talk about that, and also talk about what I think happens going forward. Are we actually going to end up in war? We'll have to see. All right, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Helps the channel. Follow us on Patreon, grab some merch. Let's jump into this thing. All right, first thing we're going to do is just a quick 30,000-foot view, quick history, how we got here. All right, so again, this is the Cliff Notes. So we're going back to World War II. United States and Venezuela used to be the best of buddies. Venezuela actually supplied nearly 50% of the oil for the United States war effort at the time. That relationship went swimmingly. That went swimmingly until 1976, of course, when Venezuela decided to nationalize their oil industry. Essentially what that means is the big companies like Exxon, Mobil, and Shell that owned much of the oil production in Venezuela kind of kicked out, turned into customers, and Venezuela nationalized and took control of all the oil. Of course, the United States really doesn't like when countries do that, Iran, etc. And again, that eventually turned us into a customer of the oil rather than an owner of the oil. And going forward, of course, Venezuela turns to socialism. Those ties fracture even further. We get close to where we are today. 2013, Nicolas Maduro is elected, and then the big problems start. Of course, the United States and him really don't get along, but who does he really get along with? China, which of course will be important a little bit later, as this might be a little bit of a proxy war that we're looking at. And Maduro further complicates the things by basically taking the nationalized oil industry and just giving control and ownership of it to his buddies and making it even more difficult for the United States to do business with them. That leads up to about 2019, when pretty much all bilateral cooperation burns out, fizzles out, and yeah, we're get to where we are today, where we have 4,000 Marines and a ton of our naval destroyers sitting off the coast of Venezuela, looking like we're potentially going to invade, maybe. And that brings us to where we are today, all right? The official story we're sort of being told out of the media and the administration is this is one big cartel crackdown. It's just an extension of shutting down the border, right? You have Maduro, who's an extension of that, supplying terrorist organizations and the drug cartels, and even the United States designating Venezuelan gangs Tren de Aragua a terrorist organization earlier in the year. And the total extension of this whole thing is the United States has now put a $50 million bounty on Maduro's head, as well as staging a ton of military presence right outside their borders. Now, is this all about cartels, or is this more likely what we always see with war with the United States, more so about control of oil and also cutting off control of oil from our biggest adversary, China? So that's what I think is really going on here, and we're going to dive a little bit into this. So obviously, Venezuela, massive producer of oil, and where does all that oil go? Well, let's take a look. As you can see, nearly 50% of all of Venezuela's oil goes to China, and who's the next biggest purchaser? Us. But again, we have to buy it, and we're buying it at a rate we're not very happy with. Why is Venezuela so important oil-wise to the United States? Well, geographically, it only takes 1 day to ship oil from Venezuela to the United States, whereas coming from the Middle East, it takes a full 30 days to get here. So yes, having a neighbor that's one of the biggest suppliers of oil and also one of the biggest suppliers of oil to China, yeah, we're not real happy about that. So what would be a really, really good thing for the United States to have happen is, oh, of course, maybe just a regime change away from a pro-China Maduro to a democracy with a pro-United States leader, which would then do what? Would allow American oil businesses, Exxon, Shell, Mobil, back into the country to invest and take ownership back of a lot of that oil production, which would be fantastic for the United States economy. And the administration is giving hints of that. I mean, even Secretary Hegseth came out and said this, right? Anytime you have the Secretary of Defense talking about how it's time for regime change, yeah, usually that only goes one way. So I'm not saying that, shutting down the cartels and Tren de Aragua and all these different things aren't important, right, to the country, cutting off the drug supply, although it's a little bit disingenuous about kind of how this is being framed, because from what I understand, Venezuela's primary producer of cocaine, not fentanyl. That's more of a, southern border issue, but it's a great, I don't want to call it propaganda tool because it's a real issue and it's one I actually agree with being shut down, but it's a great reason to give the American public for why we need military action and potential war against Venezuela. Because if you were simply just to say, well, we don't like the fact that this socialist-controlled country who has terrible ties with our country is producing tons of oil for China, yeah, the American public might not be as bought in on it. But to see where we are now, Venezuela has apparently readied 4.5 million militiamen from what they're saying. Yes, the United States Navy and Marine Corps are sitting off the coast, potentially ready to engage in a conflict. What happens next? Well, we've seen Maduro is acting a little bit out of control, sending his, one of 2 fighter jets that he has to buzz Navy ships. And it looks like potentially we're 1 aircraft away from getting shot down to spark this whole thing up like a light. But will we actually go to war with Venezuela? Will we put 4,000 Marine boots on the ground? I can tell you 4,000 Marines backed up by all the power of those navies and destroyers with U.S. American air assets on top. That is not something you want to mess with. Strategically and tactically, is it going to be possible if we need to? Yes, of course. But is it actually likely? Well, that centers on a lot of political things. First one, right out the gate, 2026 elections right around the corner. What is the American appetite, political appetite from the populace for an actual war right before the election? Oof. That is a serious gamble. Yes, you do have sort of the branding of the war about how it's counter drug and counter narcotic and counter gang, and it's keeping Americans safe, all those different things, which I'm not saying is not true. But is that enough for if U.S. soldiers start dying? That I don't know, because, man, war is always a dangerous political gamble. Okay, we saw in, I believe, Bush Jr.'s second election, they were considering enacting the draft in the global war on terror and decided not to because it was an election year and they thought it'd be political suicide. They went with the stop loss instead. And now, coming off of, the heels of the whole Iran-Israel thing, the American public was not happy about that whole thing for the most part. So do I think we're actually going to land amphibious assaults by Marines and take Venezuela and overthrow their government by force? I doubt it. Not likely. I do think there's probably massive destabilization operations going on in Venezuela right now, the CIA and special operations, all sorts of different things to try to probably, again, with these massive bounties on Maduro's head, force a regime change through subversion and sabotage tactics. That 100% I can guarantee is probably already happening right now. But as for full-scale war, I don't think America's quite ready for that one, especially in this situation. Also, even if the United States just absolutely rolled over and curb stomped, you got to think about all of the Venezuelan people that are going to end up killed in that conflict as well. And man, it would be an ugly, ugly time, especially for the incumbency, right? The Republicans, to decide to engage in war. And that's why, because of the timeline, I don't think it's going to happen that way. But I very well could be wrong. I mean, the person we have in charge has got a hair trigger. And, all of a sudden Venezuela starts firing rockets, or, their aircraft start shooting at our naval ships, and we might actually see it. But this is an interesting one because it's sort of developing in real time. And so if anything big happens, we will track it and get it in the next one. That's going to do it for this one. Catch y'all in the next one.